Hi everyone and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today we are continuing our Frosthaven series of character builds, where we're trying to take the character classes from the board game Frosthaven and recreate them in Dungeons & Dragons. Now, since Frosthaven is a newer board game in the Haven series, and since the Haven series are legacy-like games, that means that the character classes that you can play in the board game aren't all unlocked right from the get-go, and so they're not all completely common knowledge. That means that there is obviously going to be a major spoiler warning here, especially since Frosthaven is really only about a year old. So if you are playing through Frosthaven and you don't have this character class unlocked yet, or if you plan on playing Frosthaven or potentially playing it sometime down the line and you don't want anything spoiled for you, stop watching the video now. Believe me, I won't take any offense. Now, if you don't care about spoilers, or if you are playing through Frosthaven and you already have this class unlocked, or if you just want to see the character build for D&D 5e just to get some ideas and inspiration for your next character, then feel free to continue watching. I'll pause now, but this is our last spoiler warning before we get into the actual video. Today we are looking at making the second of our locked character classes, but not the second character you unlock. We are making the Snowflake, which is also known as the Snow Dancer. Now, mechanically, the Snow Dancer is actually one of the simpler character classes in Frosthaven. They don't have any real major unique mechanic, but what they do instead is heavily focus on the push and pull mechanics from base Gloomhaven and Frosthaven. Push and pull are effects that can get added to attacks or just be left on their own that work the exact same way in the Haven series as they do in D&D 5e. If you have an action, whether it's an attack or not, that says push 3, you will push an enemy 3 spaces away from you. If you have an effect that says pull 2, you'll pull that enemy 2 spaces towards you. Beyond that though, they are also the support character, and that's how I'm playing them in our playthrough. I've loaded them up with a bunch of items as well as picked all their cards to specifically boost their support capability. Beyond the pushes and the pulls, they also have lots of healing as well as buffs for their team. They can hand out conditions like nobody's business. These conditions are kind of hard to recreate though in D&D. They're things like Regenerate and Ward. Regenerate heals you at the start of your turn for 1 hit point, every turn as long as you have it until you take damage. Now that type of effect actually does exist in D&D, but it's usually high level. Ward, on the other hand, is a little bit more common in D&D. It's effectively the same thing as Resistance. Ward only lasts for the next source of damage. When you have Ward on you, whatever damages you next, whether it's a trap or an enemy, that damage will be halved, and then you lose Ward. Resistances are usually just permanent passives though, whereas Ward is not. In addition to having all the conditions that they can create in their push and pull mechanics, they are the master of ice and wind. And that means that we're also going to have to try and recreate the elements of ice and wind in D&D 5e. Typically, I usually leave this up to spellcasting, where we can pick spells that either have an effect that can be flavored as the element, or they deal a damage type that fits the element as well, or maybe they just perfectly encapsulate it already. For example, the spells Gust or Gust of Wind are kind of perfect for our wind capabilities. I also will admit that I am going to be building this character with a bit of a support bias in mind. Usually, when I build Gloomhaven and Frosthaven characters, I like to build them the way I played them at the table, though they don't have to be built that way. So most characters that could do melee end up doing melee because that's how I play them. But in this case, for our Snow Dancer, because it can do support so well, I'm going to build it to do support. Keep in mind though, that is not all it has to be. Before we start the build though, let's look at their flavor text. Algocs are at home in the north. Their thick white fur offers great protection from the elements, and their strength and intelligence put them at the top of the food chain. They are imposing figures with 3 spiraling horns atop their head. This feature they share with their distant relatives, the Inocs. Like their cousins, the Algocs gather in clans, but these are split following one of 2 rival ideologies: the Snow Speakers, who believe the Divine speaks to them through falling snow, and the Ice Speakers, who instead look to the ice growing up from the cold earth. The most adept priests of the Snow Speakers are those that move with the winds and snow, using it to make others dance as well, often against their will. It is a breathtakingly beautiful sight watching these snow dancers harness the raw power of their movement to bring forth the elements of the north. Their enemies soon find themselves sapped of all warmth as the wind beats them into a snowy grave. Starting at character creation with our lineage, we are an Algox, which makes us custom lineage, just like our Fist was, and, as the flavor text said, similar to the Inox, which we have done character builds for in the past, and those were again custom lineage. For us though, since we're going to be building a spellcaster here, because it makes sense based on what we want to build, we're not going to be huge and muscular, just a bigger character than your average spellcaster. Now with custom lineage, we're going to get all the regular good stuff, a +2 to one of our ability scores of our choice. We're going to choose to be size medium. Between the skill and dark vision, I'll say we take dark vision because it's probably going to be more useful, but you could pick the skill if you wanted to. And then we also gain a free feat. Now for the free feat, we are going to take Telekinetic. Telekinetic is going to let us improve our wisdom by +1, and then it also says that we learn the Mage Hand cantrip, which we can cast without verbal or somatic components. We can make the hand invisible when we cast it. That's not too bad. We're really going to reflavor this as just wind instead of a hand itself, maybe just a grasping breeze. But what we also are going to reflavor is the bonus action Telekinetic Shove. As a bonus action, we can telekinetically shove one creature that we can see within 30 feet of us. When we do, the target must succeed on a strength save, or be moved 5 feet toward or away from us. The creature can willingly fail this save, and that'll be important, because not only does this allow us to push or pull, it also allows us to push or pull both enemies and allies. And that is something that the Snow Dancer can do and really excels at. They're not all about just moving their enemies, they provide a lot of mobility for their team as well. Any background should work for us. Now for stats, we're going to want the following set of ability scores. Even though we're really big, we're going to put 0 points into strength and leave us at 8 there. We're then going to put 7 points into dexterity, giving us 14, another 7 into constitution to give us 14 there. We're going to leave intelligence alone, and that'll stay at 8 points as well. We're going to put 9 points, as well as our +2 from custom lineage and our +1 from telekinetic, all into wisdom to get us 18 wisdom. And then we're going to finish off with charisma at 12, putting 4 points into that. Obviously, if you'd rather prioritize strength, intelligence, or anything else other than charisma, or any of the other stats as well, feel free to rearrange them. Starting up the build at level 1, we are Druid 1. As a Druid 1, we get spellcasting and the Druidic language. We gain 2 cantrips, as well as some spells. For the cantrips, I'm going to go ahead and suggest Gust and Guidance. We're building for support and a little bit of control, so we're actually going to ignore damage-dealing cantrips for at least right now. We will pick up some extra ones eventually, and obviously you can pick whatever cantrips you want, but Guidance and Gust will both be very helpful, and using Gust plus Telekinetic will really solidify us as a character that's just trying to move our allies or enemies around the battlefield. For spells, on the other hand, pick your favorites. If you want damage spells, go right ahead. However, we are going to stick to some of the following restrictions. We want our spells to be wind or ice focused, so if they deal cold damage or can be flavored to be windy in nature, definitely pick those. Support and control spells are also obviously really good to pick up too. And then finally, some AoE spells could be pretty nice as well. The Snow Dancer does have a lot of AoE type actions, though they're not necessarily powerful or damage dealing, and some of them have some pretty weird patterns. So anything that kind of feels like we're doing a little bit of AoE just to help out our team would be good options. Level 2, we are Druid 2, and here we get to pick our Druidic Circle, and I am actually kind of torn. I think that we could really go either Land Druid or Dreams Druid. Land Druid would be more thematic. We could choose to be a Land Druid of the Arctic, we'd get an expanded spell list, and we would get Natural Recovery. Natural Recovery is essentially the Arcane Recovery wizard feature, but for druids. You can get some spell slots back during a short rest. Dream Druid, on the other hand, is like the support druid class. The reason I consider them the support druid is because their main feature they get is Balm of the Summer Court. Balm of the Summer Court says that you are a font of energy that can offer respite from injuries. You have a pool of energy represented by a number of d6s equal to your druid level, so 2 for right now, And then as a bonus action, you can choose an ally within 120 feet of you and spend a number of those dice equal to half your druid level or less. You roll the dice, add them together, and the target regains a number of hit points equal to the total rolled, plus 1 temporary hit point for every die spent. So already that's obviously a support feature, as it gives you some extra free healing. And that's why I really want to take this, and I think this is our option. Picking up Balm of the Summer Court means we don't have to pick up Healing Word as a spell slot, and that will just save us spells in the long run. We'll pick Dream Druid and just focus more on that support role. At level 3, now that we know what type of druid we are, we're jumping over to Cleric. And as a Cleric 1, we get to pick our subclass or domain. We're going to pick Nature Cleric. Nature Cleric gives us heavy armor proficiency for some reason, and it also allows us to get an extra druid cantrip. This is where we pick up our damage cantrip. I would recommend Frostbite for some cold damage, or Thorn Whip for an attack that also has a pull effect. At level 4, we are now Cleric 2, and we pretty much just gain our Channel Divinity. Our Channel Divinity is Turn Undead, but it's also Charm Plants and Animals thanks to Nature Cleric. Now, those aren't either going to be too useful, at least in terms of recreating Snow Dancer, but they could be pretty useful in your actual adventures. What's probably going to be more useful for us though, just in terms of increasing our stamina during an adventuring day, and that actually feels like a Frosthaven type of effect, is Harness Divine Power. Harness Divine Power is an optional feature for the clerics from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and it says that we can expend a use of our Channel Divinity to fuel our spells. As a bonus action, we use our Holy Symbol, utter a prayer, and regain 1 expended spell slot, the level of which can be no higher than half our proficiency bonus rounded up. So it's kind of like a poor person's Arcane Recovery or Natural Recovery, just done through Channel Divinity. One thing to keep in mind is that it is not actually a Channel Divinity option, even though it does expend a use of Channel Divinity. Even though at level 2 as a cleric, we can use this one time, if we do a short rest and get our Channel Divinity back, we can't actually do this again until the next long rest. At level 5, we are Cleric 3, and here we don't really gain anything other than more spells, and specifically 2nd level Cleric spells. Some good options here are probably going to be Aid, Warding Bond, Prayer of Healing, or Hold Person flavored as Ice. Again, you can pick whatever spells you want, just try to keep to the restrictions of support or control spells, spells that can be flavored as Ice or Wind, or some AoE spells if you do actually want some damage. At level 6, we are Cleric 4, and we gain our first ability score improvement / feat. Without even thinking about it, we're just going to put a +2 into our Wisdom to cap it at 20. At level 7, we are Cleric 5, and now we have access to 3rd level spells. Again, we don't really gain anything important for our character, just follow the spell restrictions to pick up some that can be thematically appropriate for us. Also, there's a lot of powerful spells because 5th level is the first caster power boost with 3rd level spells, so there can be some pretty good options. At level 8, we are Cleric 6, and this is actually going to be our last level in Cleric. We went up this far specifically for this ability that we get here, and that is the Nature Cleric's Dampen Elements ability. Dampen Elements says that when we, or a creature within 30 feet of us, takes acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage, we can use our reaction to grant resistance to the creature against that instance of damage. This is our ward ability, at least as close as I can make it happen. It's going to be the main thing we use our resistance for, and it is only useful when we're going up against elemental damage types, but it is pretty much just throwing up a ward onto one of our allies, having the damage for them, and then continuing about our day, just like the Snow Dancer would do in Frosthaven. I probably could have mentioned that Absorb Elements as a spell that we could have gotten right away at Druid 1 would have been also a really good representation of Ward. However, that's built for melee characters just a little bit more than this feature, because of the fact that it also grants you extra damage on your next melee attack, which we don't really care about. But we would want to probably pick up Absorb Elements to have the ability to grant ourselves resistance to elemental damage. However, what makes this ability really nice, and the reason I wanted it for recreating Ward, is because of the fact that it can be infinitely repeatable. It takes a reaction, but there's no cap on how many times we use it, and there's no cost in terms of resources, spell slots, or anything like that. Finally, while we're on the topic of Ward, the Warding Bond spell actually can be a perfect recreation for one specific card that the Snow Dancer has access to. There's a card that says you play this on one of your allies, and that character permanently gains ward at the start of each of their turns. That means that they would just have the damage of the first attack that they take. And while this isn't a good recreation of that card, but it is a good recreation of the condition, the Warding Bond spell, which allows us to just grant permanent resistance to all damage to one of our allies, is a really good recreation of that card. They do the same sort of thing with a bit of a trade-off. Warding Bond in D&D makes us take damage when our ally that we cast Warding Bond on takes damage. The card in Frosthaven just stops the first instance of damage that our allies take, but we don't suffer any damage with them. So I think that's a fair trade. At level 9, we're going to jump back to Druid for pretty much the rest of the build, and we are a Druid 3. Here we gain 2nd level Druid spells, although we are up to 5th level spells now as a caster, which is pretty nice. And for us, that means that we actually gain Summon Beast. I don't think we could have picked it up earlier than this, but we definitely wanted to pick it up, and the reason for that is because the Snow Dancer actually has summons, 3 to be exact, and they are all various types of beasts. You can have a little fox, a pair of snowy owls, or a large snow leopard that can be very deadly. And the Snow Dancer is actually a really good summoner in the Haven series because not only do they create their summon, they can protect them by pushing or pulling them out of danger. Whether or not we're actually going to do that playstyle is totally up to you, but I definitely wanted to have the option to do that playstyle by picking up Summon Beast. And then, with it, we can use Telekinetic, Gust, or any other forced movement abilities to help our beast get into or out of position, depending on what happens in combat. At level 10, we are Druid 4, and here we're just going to improve our ability scores again. I would say you either want to improve your Dexterity for some more AC, or Constitution for more health. Pick your favorite ability score between Dexterity or Constitution, improve it, and call it a day. At level 11, we are Druid 5, and, well, you know the drill. We don't really get anything in terms of features, but we do have 3rd level Druid spells. Pick your favorites, make them thematic, or at least reflavor them so it makes sense that a Snow Dancer would have them. At level 12, we are Druid 6, and here we gain Hearth of Moon and Shadow, another Dreams Druid feature. And it's an interesting one, because it's situational, but actually could be pretty darn good. What it says is that during a short or long rest, we can create a 30-foot radius sphere of magic appears around us. While within this sphere, we and our allies gain a +5 bonus to Dexterity stealth checks and Wisdom perception checks, and any light or open flame from inside the sphere isn't visible to others outside it. The sphere will vanish at the end of the rest or when we leave it. Now, this is not necessarily a very mechanically powerful feature for anything like combat, but it is actually a really powerful feature for exploration. It grants you a hefty defensive bonus for both short and long rests, and that can be really awesome. If your DM is the type who takes exploration to mean the possibility of having an ambush encounter happen during a long rest or a short rest, or especially if you're in a dungeon and not just in the wilderness, this ability will allow us to at least mitigate the chance of that happening. We'll take it because we have to, but also because it feels like it makes us a support outside of combat and just in part of the exploration pillar of the game too, and that's pretty nice. Level 13 is level 7 Druid, now have access to 4th level Druid spells, and we have access to, I believe, 7th level spell slots. Again, you know the drill, thematic spells, spells you like, anything that feels like a Snow Dancer should have it, there you go. At level 14, we're a level 8 Druid, we get another ability score improvement / feat, and once again we're improving Constitution or Dexterity. I would suggest probably picking the opposite of what we picked before, just so we can be a balanced character, but if you want to just increase the same one you did last time, go right ahead. At level 15, we are a level 9 Druid, and again, this is pretty much where I just tell you to pick your favorite spells because we now have access to 5th level Druid spells, but we have all the way up to 8th level spell slots. However, because we're getting into some pretty powerful spells, let's take a quick look at what would sort of fit the restrictions we're going for. Cone of Cold is obviously the bread and butter cold damage spell. It's one of the most iconic spells from D&D in terms of cold damage, and we would definitely probably want to pick that up. Mass Cure Wounds is another iconic spell, especially for a support build like us, so it's another great option. Maelstrom is an interesting one from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, because it's a concentration spell that creates a mass of water that swirls in a 30-foot radius on a point we can see within range. Until the spell ends, not only is the area difficult terrain, and any creature that starts its turn there must succeed on a strength save or take 6d6 bludgeoning damage and be pulled 10 feet towards the center, it's very, very powerful in terms of creating this big cyclone. And we could reflavor it as an actual wind cyclone, like a tornado or an icy blizzard. Level 16, we are Druid 10, and here we gain Hidden Paths from the Dream Druid. And Hidden Paths is a nice little get out of jail free card, or get into danger free card if you also wanted to think of it that way. It says that as a bonus action, we can teleport 60 feet to an unoccupied space we can see. Alternatively though, we can use our action to teleport one willing creature we touch up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space we can see instead. And we can do this a number of times equal to our Wisdom modifier. Just a nice utility ability. Level 17, we're a level 11 druid. We have 6 level spells now. Follow our restrictions, but also don't listen to me and think outside the box a little bit in terms of what would work really well for a Snow Dancer character. Level 18, we're a level 12 druid. We have our last ability score improvement / feat that we're going to get, and we are going to either cap off the dexterity or constitution that we've been improving this entire time, or we're just going to buff one of them by 2 once again. At level 19, we're a 13th level druid. We have 7th level druid spells now, and we definitely have 9th level spell slots, so we're getting into world-breaking territory, which I'm usually hesitant to get to with Gloomhaven and Frosthaven characters, because even though we're recreating them in Dungeons & Dragons, in Gloomhaven and Frosthaven, they don't do the kind of world-altering things that D&D characters can do. Don't get me wrong, they get really powerful abilities that break the game itself, but they don't completely alter the world with things like Wish. 7th level is usually the max that I would ever really want to get to with a character, so I'm glad we did get to it with our Snow Dancer, because that can really help us capture the feel of being a master of the elements of ice and wind, and we can hopefully get some pretty powerful storm-type spells. This is where our journey ends in terms of the power level of our spell progression, and that's perfectly fine. Finally, at level 20, we are Druid 14, so we gain our Dreams Druid Capstone. When I originally read this ability, I thought it was amazing, because I didn't actually read the full ability, and I was kind of disappointed when I did. It says, and I blame the designers for wording it this way, because you get excited first and then I have a little bit of a letdown later. But it says, when you finish a short rest, you can cast one of the following spells without expending a spell slot or requiring material components. Dream, with you as the messenger, Scrying, or Teleportation Circle. Once this feature is used, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. It is on me, but when I first read this, I thought it was a free Scrying, Teleportation Circle, or Dream once per short rest, which for a 14th level character is pretty powerful, for a 20th character not so much, but still a free 5th level spell per short rest would be really, really good. Still nice and can help with world building, lore, and traveling around the world, but not necessarily anything to get overly excited about. Alright, time to summarize the build. Well, in all honesty, we've covered a lot, so we're going to break it down pretty quickly. In terms of the positives for Frosthaven, we have a lot of ice and wind-esque stuff. We have Telekinetic, which we've reflavored to be Wind. We presumably have Gust as a cantrip, and maybe Gust of Wind as a concentration spell we at least use for like early levels for some extra on-demand push. We also have a lot of healing and support abilities. Balm of the Summer Court dice pool of d6s equal to our druid level is really big. 14 d6. We can spend 7 at any given time, but if we want to just spend 1 whenever an ally goes down to just get them back on their feet again, that's perfectly fine too. It's super efficient. 14 free uses of what is effectively Healing Word. Obviously, Healing Word does have a modifier associated with it, but even if our allies are making death saves and we give them 1 hit point, based on the regular rules of 5e, unless you're using like negative hit points or anything like that, that would be enough to get them back on their feet. And then they also gain an extra temporary hit point on top of whatever they roll on that d6. It's not a lot of stellar healing, but it can be pretty nice. And actually, yet again, another spell I didn't talk about could be quite good if you pair it with Beacon of Hope. Beacon of Hope makes any die rolled for you or allies within a 30-foot aura of you just roll their max when you're healing them. Now all of a sudden that Balm of the Summer Court doesn't need the modifier because it's just going to be the max 6. We also have summons. You can use them, you don't have to, but having the option is exactly what we want because the Snow Dancer has the option in Frosthaven. In terms of the positives for D&D, well, we have 14d6 of free healing, like I just talked about. We have plenty of control and movement abilities, along with other types of support abilities, because we could have picked up any spells that were support-oriented in nature. We won't be shining in terms of damage, but we can deal damage. We can get some pretty powerful AoE spells, and of course, we can throw down hazardous terrain like Spike Growth, and then push and pull enemies through that terrain to just automatically make them suffer damage. Negatives for Frosthaven, there's actually not too many. Like I said, this was a pretty straightforward character to recreate. There's probably a few things that we missed that I haven't really talked about, but for the most part, we should be able to get most of what the Snow Dancer can do in Frosthaven. It's just going to be the D&D version, so as close as possible. For negatives for D&D though, we have a lot of concentration spells. We're going to really need to determine what role we want to fill based on our choice. If you want damage, cast Spike Growth. If you want healing, cast Beacon of Hope, or another spell if you want. If you want control, probably Hold Person or Hold Monster if we were able to pick that up. Gust of Wind again, though that's probably a lower level spell that we would use for concentration. But anything like that that's still thematic and can control enemies is a great option. Other than that, that's the build. We are pretty much the Snow Dancer. Let me know what you thought of the build or what you would change or add to get closer to the theme of the Frosthaven character class, or just how you would make a control type support character that can also use hazardous terrain or is based on the elements of wind and ice. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.